Send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Chizito. On Spectrum tonight, what is the perspective of civil society on the current debate on the oil and gas sector and Parliament's way of handling the matter? The ad hoc committee of Parliament tasked with investigating the oil and gas sector officially commences work on Tuesday. The task ahead for this committee has been described as daunting and important to Uganda, given the fact that its findings are likely to chart the way forward for the oil and gas sector. Many stakeholders are expected to appear before this committee as it begins its public hearings. The committee has issued a call to all that have information that can help it to deal with the task at hand and also provide information that can help the country develop a robust oil and gas sector to come forward and give them that information. Among such stakeholders is the civil society, which has already put in place a coalition on the oil and gas sector. Several issues have emerged about the sector, including the need for stronger laws, transparency, accountability, and proper planning. Other cross-cutting issues revolve around the rights of indigenous people in the oil-rich areas and the urgent need to protect the environment. Now, civil society believes that they have carried out enough research that could be important in achieving a national consensus so as to help the country avoid what is knowingly called the oil curse. So tonight we seek the views of civil society on several aspects of this industry, but also try to find out their position on exactly how Parliament is tackling this matter. Our guests tonight, well, people who would know. Mr. Henry Baziira, Chairman of the Civil Society Coalition on Oil and Gas, also substantively Executive Director of the Water Governance Institute. You're most welcome, Mr. Baziira.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
We're also joined by Mr. Robert Ddamulira, Energy and Climate Manager at the Worldwide Fund for Nature. You're most welcome, Mr. Ddamulira.
Thank you very much, Edmond.
We're also joined by Mr. Onesmus Mugyenyi, Deputy Executive Director and Manager Environmental Democracy Program at ACODE. You're most welcome, Mr. Mugyenyi.
Thank you and good evening, listeners.
Mr. Ddamulira, on Tuesday, the ad hoc committee set up by Parliament begins its work. There seems to be a determination to clean up this sector. Do you think that's moving in the right direction, or do you think it will do what we expect it to do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Edmond, and good evening, listeners. As Edmond has rightly said, I am Robert Ddamulira from the Worldwide Fund for Nature, Uganda Country Office. And in response to that question, that particular question, I think this is a positive step in the right direction. Civil society organizations for a number of years now, we have been calling for greater transparency, for greater public participation in these processes. And I think the members of Parliament investigation of these issues provides us as civil society a platform to contribute effectively and meaningfully to this discussion. But I also want to wish that the members of Parliament look at this oil sector within the global context of energy. I'm right now looking at the figures from the International Energy Agency, and the figures are that oil by far outwits all other forms of energy in form of supplying global energy consumption.
Yes.
Coal is the second best, but it is quickly adding up, and then gas is the next, third best. Nuclear is the fourth best, yes. And hydropower is the last. Now, in Uganda, that situation is quite different, because in Uganda, biomass energy is contributing 93%
yes.
of all our energy resources.
That is wood-based energy, yes. Charcoal and firewood.
Charcoal and firewood is leading to a deforestation rate of 6,000 hectares per month. Those are a hectare is a football pitch. So those are 6,000 namboles we are constructing every month. At this rate, NEMA predicts that by 2050, there will be no forest, no area that can be described as a forest.
That's about 40 years' time.
Yes. A forest is 10 trees per hectare. So there will be no place in Uganda at this rate by 2050 if nothing is done. So I would like not to go very much into the other forms of energy, but I would like the members of Parliament to look at the broader picture, but how also oil contributes to overcoming these challenges. Because imagine how, if we were to use the oil rightly, we could reverse all this. We would have money to invest into our hydropower potential, we would have money to conserve our forests, and we would have money to take millions of people out of poverty. So oil is a bridging gap, but it's finite, and we have a window of about 20 years to make the right decisions. If that 20 years, and remember that this government, with all due respect, has been in power for about 26 years now. So less than the time that this government has been in place, look into the future, and you have no oil.
That's true.
The money will be spent.
Right.
So how we strategize to actually manage the transparency, ensure that the money is put into the right causes, the engines of growth and development, will have serious consequences on whether we solve this big energy question or we don't.
You brought in two things. One, you've spoken about the money, which is something I'd like us to catch on very well tonight. But you've also mentioned the alternative energy perspective. Let's hear from you, Mr. Mugyenyi. Is that something that you catch very well? Is it likely, this oil, to help us improve our environment, or the management of it?
Obviously, I do agree with Robert that is the way we should go. I think many of these issues are already in the public domain, and actually how oil can contribute actually solving many of the problems that we have in the energy sector. But I wanted to take actually a different angle of looking at things and how actually Parliament is proceeding. Yes, there is some level of appreciation at the policy level, but I wanted to look at the level of preparedness. How are we preparing ourselves actually to harness this industry, oil, to solve actually those other problems that have been talked about? And going back to where you started from, the ACODE Committee of Parliament, and what it is looking at, and it's already indicated that this is in a positive direction, but I wanted us to have a total reflection of actually the level of preparedness actually to harness this oil. And I think that will form the core of this debate. Whereas actually the ACODE Committee is following actually issues, of transparency and the allegation that we made in Parliament, there are other fundamental aspects that actually we need to be looking at. How do you go into this industry and ensure that this industry is able to solve our problems? There are a number of aspects that actually have been talked about, and one of the important aspects is the policy. The second aspect is the law and the regulations. Because even when you talk about transparency, you are talking about the mechanisms, and these mechanisms are brought in place by the policy, the legislation, and then the regulations that actually follow. And you will note that in 2008, this country took a positive step and put in place a national oil and gas policy, having realized that actually we needed this before actually we go into actually the production. And then we did an assessment of the level of preparedness in terms of legislation, in terms of regulation, and we realized that actually most of our laws were outdated. They came into place actually when we didn't have a lot of facts about oil, and therefore there are gaps. And we agreed we will put in place two pieces of legislation that are very important. One about the regulation, the second one about revenue management. And you will note that up to now we don't have these two pieces of legislation. So the issues of transparency, the issues of accountability are supposed to be incorporated within these pieces of legislation. And the question is, how are we prepared actually to go into the development of this industry without these pieces of legislation? The rest of the work that is being done, previously we've signed the production sharing agreements, and we are looking forward to signing more actually production sharing agreements, and we've agreed that actually we didn't have good legislation, and we said we put in place these pieces of legislation. The question now is, what is happening? What why is it that we don't have a time frame? Why is it that we are not getting clear signals from government that actually this is the roadmap, this is the timetable, and Ugandans settle, we are bringing the laws, and this industry is going to be guided by these laws. I think that's one of the most important aspects that actually we need to be talking about.
You put it very, very succinctly. Obviously, some of these questions I'll be throwing them back to you, so you can give us what you think should really be done in the ideal situation. Not really ideal, the practical situation. Mr. Baziira, talk to us about our level of preparedness. Do you think we're doing the right thing? Well, Parliament, this committee beginning to talk. Are we doing the right things, pressing the right buttons as a government?
I think
or as a country.
As a country, and as a parliament, as a government, I could say we're in the process of doing the right thing. For me, what I'm happy about is that we are at the threshold of exploiting our oil. Oil exploitation has not actually started, and so we have an opportunity to correct or to make things right. We are not in a situation like other countries who discovered long after venturing into production without the right regulatory framework. I am, however, disappointed at the pace at which we are trying to develop the necessary frameworks, the institutional frameworks, the regulatory frameworks. Yet the oil and gas industry is running at a faster pace than the government is following, because they're here to do business, and time is money, and so when we slack, they actually reach a point where they force government to say, look, for us now, we're at the point of producing oil, and we want to start tomorrow. Yet, we do not have the necessary regulatory mechanism in place. And so, government is caught between the hard place.
The rock and the hard place.
The rock and the hard place. And so, the choices, should we allow them, shouldn't we allow them to proceed? And yet we know that the costs they incur on a daily basis to have the infrastructure in place, or the machinery in place, is so astronomical. Yeah. So we are in a situation where now we're almost being held at ransom to allow companies to produce in the absence of the right regulatory frameworks, and that's my disappointment. However, we still have a great opportunity to make things right. What is happening in Parliament has excited me as a person, and we should have had similar parliaments in the past. Probably then some of the problems that we are seeing today would have been resolved. I hope that the current parliament is going to maintain the vigor and the interest in addressing the oil and gas issue. There are some disappointing things about parliament also, in trying to take the role of the high courts, of being the judge, being the...
What do you mean by that?
Because, for example, like the ministers who have been accused of bribery,
yes,
and the ad hoc committee that has been put in place, we know that Parliament is partisan by its nature.
Well,
so
it's not a hung Parliament.
Yes. So by them to force or to demand the ministers to step aside is like taking on the responsibility.
You don't think that's the right thing to do?
They shouldn't have been doing that. If you have been following up today's stories in the papers, I really like the article that came in today's paper by Kenneth Kakuru, one of the lawyers in town.
Yes.
I think he put it the way I would have loved it for Parliament to hear.
Well, wouldn't read it.
What he says is, Parliament is supposed to collect the information, and if there's evidence that these people have a case to answer, then the right institutions, the courts, then take over the responsibility.
But will these people influence the committee's work if they're still in office?
Obviously.
They will. So let them step out of the office.
Any citizen who is concerned about ethics, who is concerned about his reputation as an individual, who is concerned about the interests of this country, if they put any allegations on you, Edmund, the best thing to do is to step aside.
Yes.
You make a choice. You don't wait to be...
And if they don't want to step down, the Parliament should force them, maybe.
Well, I think citizens may ask them to step aside.
All right. Mr. Ddamulira, take us deep on your analysis. You say oil can help us improve our environment. Exactly how?
Yeah, thank you very much, Edmond. I think the other issue which, when we look at the oil sector in Uganda, is that we must look at it not occurring in isolation, but in a global industry. In other words, we are not on an island somewhere dealing in an unknown good.
Yes.
We are within a global economy, dealing in a global good.
Yes.
And I just wanted to produce some facts. The fact is that from the International Energy Agency database 2010, that 3 nations produce a third of the global oil production.
Yes.
This is Russia in order of the production. This is Russia, this is Saudi Arabia, and this is USA.
Yes.
Now, 10 nations produce 60% of whatever is produced in the whole world.
Yes.
And of course this includes Iran, China, Canada, Mexico, UAE, and the rest of the world.
Yes.
Now, it's an undemocratic industry. In other words, some people take lion's share and others take...
Well, but God gave it to them. Well, you can't blame them, really.
Yes, but in a way, it's placing the Ugandan industry into that context.
Yes.
And therefore, as we get into this oil discussion, we must ask critical questions. Are we going to consume it locally? Can our people afford the international markets of oil? Because we are occurring in an international market.
Well, but I think oil is regulated. You can correct me if
Yes.
Oil is regulated by there's a cartel, OPEC, oil producing and exporting countries. Oil has to be produced, sold onto that market. They set the prices, $80 a barrel, $100 a barrel, and then that's it. We can't really sell it locally. You can't do a bypass and sell it locally. You have to put it on the wine market, and then Uganda buys it like it's buying it from Europe. Or
Yes. Edmond, let me ask you a question. If you are producing beans, like beans, and then if you sell them to your neighbor, you can get the price
yes.
of meat. Yeah?
Yes.
Would you stay with the beans or sell to the neighbor and then buy meat? So in this context, I think we have a product, but we may make more sense, more money in that sense, and then generate more growth possibilities.
All right.
If we're able to market this international or convert it into a product like electricity.
Let's leave out the intricacies of marketing. Let's talk about the oil and its impact on the economy. How would it help us get off fuel, for instance? Shall we begin to use gas for instance?
Yes. That's very, very good. I think this also calls for us to understand how the biomass industry works in Uganda.
Yes.
And I think what is going to happen is that oil may create opportunities for people to get a higher income. In other words, we have a more productive economy, and therefore we can afford modern forms of energy.
Let's look at gas, for instance. We can use gas for cooking, can't we?
Yeah, but
in some places they flare it, they burn it off, but we can harness it and give it to our homes cheaply to use for cooking instead of burning firewood.
Yeah, but the explanation is that because we are operating in a global economy, it is likely that this gas
is
will
not
maintain.
Gas is not that
international.
regulated. Sometimes it's just burnt or flared.
No, it's just that the cost of investment into the gas packaging and the transportation is so enormous.
It's enormous.
Yeah, and then the quantity of gas that is being flared is quite small.
Right.
So like when you look at most of our oil fields, they are filled with oil that is a solid at room temperature.
Right.
So it becomes and very little gas. So the gas, as according to the government plans which I have with me here, is that the gas is proposed to be combined with some of the heavy oil, such that it is converted into electricity on site. So there is no marketing, but just turning it into a higher value product of electricity, which has a market, a more ready market.
But very briefly, how can this oil help us get off the environment?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest challenges to the environment sector in this country is that we're a poor nation, and therefore the people are poor, but also the government is poor. And what this implies is that when the oil comes on board and is able to provide that added income, we can more readily invest into higher forms of environment goods. We can more readily invest into...
Like what? I'm looking for the connection between the man using a cigarette home, a charcoal stove, and this oil, money which might be invested abroad or central. How do you connect the two? To get them off the environment, the abuse of the environment. Firewood, charcoal.
Actually, if it's...
I think environment is more...
Let me just chip in here. I think, Edmund, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, is what we use in our gas cylinders. We are buying gas on the open market.
Yes.
Okay? And to me, I would like to see a government plan, because we know we have gas, irrespective of the amounts. What I would like to see is a study telling me that the amount of gas that we are getting from these oil fields is not economically viable for us to have it containerized in the gas cylinders. I would like to see gas cylinders cheaper than they are today.
Yes.
I'm not sure how much it is at the open market currently, but at least something is probably around 60,000 a 12-liter container. Yes. Okay? So, if we made this gas cheaper than what it is today, it would definitely take off the demand for firewood and charcoal. Because I know there's a point where we reached and charcoal was more expensive than gas.
Yes.
And many people shifted from charcoal to gas. So we need to see a program as government that is going to containerize this gas and make it readily available. 2, we are talking about thermal power generation.
Yes.
This gas can be used to produce electricity, which Robert has just alluded to, and put on the national grid. And through the Uganda electrification thing, we could take the grid to other places. However, I want to remind you that there are certain places that the national grid, centralized or independent, can never reach, like in Undibujo, like in Kanungo, some places.
What do you mean? Are they so remote?
They're difficult. It doesn't make sense.
No, it's more challenging.
It's no.
They are very remote.
These independent power producers or suppliers want to take
commercially, it won't work for them.
it doesn't make sense, economic sense, to take it to a sparsely populated area. So we need to find alternative energy that can reach them. And that is where we have to put in place an energy mix that includes gas, biogas, and to me, that will take off the demand and the pressure on forest wood.
All right, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. We're going for a break. When we come back, we'll go deeper on this.
Let the sunlight in.
Good morning, sunshine of my life. You look happy today.
I am. I came in here and I saw there was a whole pile of washing to do.
But I thought you didn't like doing the washing.
No, I love it. Anything else you need washed?
Sunlight 2-in-1 with added fabric softener. Smells so good, you want to use it again and again.
Let the sunlight in.
Sunlight 2-in-1. Sunlight clean, sunlight fresh.
Sunlight in. Happiness is all around. Let the sunlight in.
Is your internet provider turning your world upside down? Broadband Company offers fast and reliable internet solutions. And for the first 100 subscribers this month, we offer zero connection fees. Save up to 400,000. For more information on these offers, call toll-free 0800 222 111.
Broadband Company, more than you expect.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also help friends seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special, you've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. What is the perspective of civil society on the current debate on the oil and gas sector and Uganda's parliament's way of handling this matter? Our guests tonight, Mr. Henry Baziira, Chairman of the Civil Society Coalition on Oil and Gas, also Executive Director of the Water Governance Institute, Mr. Robert Ddamulira, Energy and Climate Manager at the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and Mr. Onesmus Mugyenyi, Deputy Executive Director and Manager Environmental Democracy Program at ACODE. You'll be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. I'd like to come to you, Mr. Mugyenyi, to give us your perspective about what we should be doing right now in broad terms. But first of all, Mr. Baziira, can you talk to us about this coalition, exactly what it is very briefly, and what can we expect from it?
The Civil Society Coalition brings together community-based organizations, national NGOs, and international NGOs. And the purpose is that we would like to provide